Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 3 of Sermon Podcast. It is Sunday, not Monday, but you'll see this on Monday.
Yep.
We are filming right after service because you are headed out of town.
I am. I've got an event. I'm headed out of the country, in fact.
Yeah. So we're excited for you to get some time away.
But I will be back next week, so people don't need to think Brian's going to be gone next week. I'll be back. I'm just gone for a few days.
No, I have learned that when pastors announce that they're not going to be in a pulpit the next week, people are either like, yes, finally, or they just stay home.
That's what happens here. It gets like,
So
a lot of folks.
I'm new here, right? Like only 3 months. So
Yeah.
do you use the element of surprise, I guess? You
I don't
just
tell
show up?
anybody anything.
Not even your staff?
Well,
where's
for the most
Brian?
part,
I don't know.
Yeah, no, for the most part, no. But I mean, Brandon knows. Of course, my assistant knows.
Yeah.
I mean, Joyce knows everything, and
Well, she keeps your travel log.
she does. She keeps my calendar in general. So, like
Yeah.
a lot of times, folks will say, "Hey, I really want to meet with you." I'll always say, "Contact Miss Joyce. She will make it happen faster than I will." And she's just better at my calendar than me.
Barbie, my assistant, is the same way for me. And I cannot, this is the third church I've served. I cannot brag on our admin staff enough. I mean, they do an incredible job at their job, but my assistant, your assistant, they go above and beyond, like way beyond. Barbie on Sunday mornings gets donuts for my kids
It's awesome.
because we get donuts for the band and people.
Yeah.
She gets donuts, a separate box for my children.
We have an incredible team, man. And I've said this before, too, not just on the admin. I mean, I agree with you. Our admin team is fantastic. But across the board, we have such a pace here that if you are slack, if you're not working, you're going to stand out and you won't last.
Yeah.
I mean, people are going to just run past you because God has been good to this church. We're getting more done with less.
Yeah.
And you're seeing it. I mean, the baptisms today, we see decisions almost every week. People are joining, it seems like every week. I mean, every week I get the decisions, email, and I'm like, wow. Today it was that way. I mean, I'm sure tomorrow I'll get the email and there'll be more people on there.
And that's something to celebrate. I mean, we had 3 baptisms in our services today, 2 in the first, 1 in the second. And I made this point, during church, but it's worth it to be brought up again. The average amount of baptisms in a Southern Baptist church is 2 per
crazy.
year.
That's awful.
Per year.
Yeah.
And how the Lord, I mean, you and I get that report each week on how many baptisms we've had year to date.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable what God is doing, and we are definitely in an anomaly of the situation.
And I feel like every year, I've been here 8 years now. A couple weeks ago was 8 years. It seems like every year we're picking up momentum.
Yeah.
To me and to folks I've been talking to, it feels like as a church that the momentum is just continuing to climb. I'm very excited about our direction, where we're going, what we're doing.
Yeah.
So even seeing the baptisms again today, and that's not rare in our church. We do baptisms very often, but we even do baptisms for folks that have an extreme like stage fright, where they'll come to me and say, or come to someone on the team and say, I feel like God's leading me. I got to get baptized. But there's a fear, like the lights and the crowd, where we've done baptisms for smaller crowds. Like we'll do something on a Sunday afternoon.
in a swimming pool.
Yeah.
Done that before.
I mean, we've done things like that. We've done things. We have like one of those portable type deals, and we'll do it down in one of the other rooms, and we'll grab 20 people, so it's not like 1,000 people. So
You know what's real cool about that portable baptistry? I saw Brandon using it as a hot tub.
I knew it. That explains so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm lying. I didn't see that. But that'd be pretty cool.
I knew it.
Like, what if you had a jacuzzi as your portable baptistry and just wheel that thing in and then it sat in your office?
I like the churches that have a baptistry that doubles as a horse trough.
Okay, so when I was singing, I spent 3 years on the road singing gospel music. We sang at cowboy churches in Texas.
That's legit, though.
And no joke, man,
Yeah.
they would have horse troughs for baptistries
I got respect
that they
for
were
that.
using as horse troughs.
It's fantastic.
It was unbelievable, but that was some of the best church service.
Would there be another
ministry
option, like in the areas you're referring to? Like, would there be a river or a creek they could have used?
Oh, the rivers all.
Oh, yeah.
But,
All over
I mean,
Texas.
Man,
yeah.
in Texas, like here, let me put it in perspective. We lived in Tarrant County, which is the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. And so we lived in Grapevine, Texas, which is where the DFW airport is.
Okay.
All right. There are more people in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex within a 30-mile we lived in the center. Dallas is 15 miles one way, Fort Worth's the other way. If you draw a circle around where we were, there are 6.1 million people. Wow. There are 6.1 million people in the state of South Carolina.
Yeah.
Where I'm from.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Isn't that crazy?
Highly populated. I've been to Texas many times,
yeah.
but I'm always there for the thing, and then I go.
It's the greatest country in the world. And if you don't believe
Texas,
me, ask a Texan.
Ask anyone from Texas.
They will tell you.
That's true. I've known people, and we've had folks that I've hired and everything it seems like everyone from Texas, when they leave Texas, all they want to do is get back to Texas.
That's a fact.
Yeah.
That's a fact. You know, my wife was born in Texas, and we had her grandmother here. Her aunt and uncle live in Monroe, actually.
Georgia?
Yep. And so her grandmother was here visiting.
I live in Monroe.
And I know you do.
Yeah.
They don't live far from you.
That's cool.
Her grandmother said, I'm here, but I'm ready to get back to Texas.
See?
I was
Yeah.
like, Granny, you just left.
I've also seen the opposite. Folks that are not from Texas, when they go and move to Texas, they kind of want to go somewhere else. I've seen that.
So that was my story. I mean, we loved living in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
My kids were born in Texas. My wife's a native Texan. I'm the only foreigner.
Your
in my
kids were
house.
both born there?
Yeah. But it was hard. It was hard because I'm from South Carolina. I missed being able to drive an hour and a half, and I was in the mountains.
Yeah.
And to go fish. Or 3 hours I was in
You're at the
Charleston.
beach,
Or
yeah.
2 hours I was in Atlanta from where I grew up. So, and in 2 hours you're not out of the same county.
Right.
You know, so
Yeah.
it's just a different world. I
Yeah.
love Texas. If stuff hits the fan here, I'm headed to Texas.
Yeah.
Because they'll just take care of themselves.
Yeah. No,
It's
I
the
know.
world's sixth largest economy.
That's amazing.
The state of Texas. Anyway, I digress. We're in Georgia.
I like
I'm grateful
Georgia.
to be in Georgia. I
Love
like
Georgia.
Georgia too. New set scene. I think Joyce put these coffee mugs. Mine's empty.
She's very intelligent.
Because I had mine last year. But I do have my community coffee
That's our coffee house.
from our coffee house. Abby Moody. runs
Shout
it
out
great.
to Abby.
She made me today a chai latte with honey and a shot of espresso.
Goodness, that's a lot of words.
Delicious.
Chai, latte, shot of espresso.
Little spicy, little sweet, kind of like me.
Oh, it's a spicy chai?
Kind of
Yeah.
like me. Sweet spicy. Anyway, shout out to our coffee shop. If you're here on Sunday mornings, it's open at 9 a.m.
It's phenomenal, too.
It's really good. We all always hit it in between services. Today, we're back in Mark 7. We took a little break last week for special needs emphasis. And so we're discussing one of my favorite stories in the
Really?
Gospels altogether. Yes.
No kidding. The Syrophoenician woman.
Yes. And the reason is because of what you mentioned in service today, kind of the big take home, is that this passage is proof that the gospel is for everyone.
Yep.
And we have lots of people in theological circles who are brilliant academics who tend to be on the far side of Calvinism. And we have other folks who are on the far side of Arminianism. And when I read John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. And then this passage, as you hit on today, the gospel's for everyone, man. And it is not discriminatory at all.
Yep.
Free for everyone who believes.
Sure.
The whosoever will. I love that word, whosoever will. But that, I thought just a great Sunday, just a great time of really digging into this passage. You hit a couple points that I'd love for you to expound on. You spent a lot of time on the lady's comment where he said, Jesus says to her, this is verse 27, and he was saying to her, let the children be satisfied first, for it is not good to take children's bread and throw it to the dogs, which seems pretty harsh. But her answer, this is verse 28, but she answered and said to him, yes, Lord, but even the dogs under the table feed them the children's crumbs.
Yeah.
I love her response.
It's incredible. And it's another passage. There's so many passages that once you've been to church long enough, if you grew up in church, this is another one of those examples of a passage we could fly through and miss the point. And the statement that he makes could at first come across very slanderous. It seems to be like he's calling her and her people, her daughter, dogs, right? But we camped out on what's going on. What does that mean? What's the difference? I don't want to go through the whole sermon of what we already went through.
You
but
mentioned today,
it was amazing.
You know some women that if you said that about their daughter,
they'll cut you.
They'll cut you.
Oh, yeah.
That was got a good response.
Yeah, speaking of Texas. Right?
Yeah, right. No, in Texas, they'll kill you.
Yeah,
They'll shoot you. If you cut them, you give them a chance.
Yeah.
Texas,
Man.
there's no chance. I love how this passage starts off. If you're reading the gospel, I went through a chronological Bible a couple years ago and just loved it. It painted a whole new picture for me, especially with the Old Testament. But if you look at the New Testament, how the ministry of Jesus really ramps up after the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah.
And walking toward the cross, right? Walking
Yeah.
towards his crucifixion, ultimately his resurrection. You see Jesus, and I love how Mark described it. Jesus, I think it's verse 2, said Jesus tried not to be noticed. He tried to go into a house to not be noticed. Verse 24. Jesus got up and went away from there to the region of Tyre. And when he had entered a house, he wanted no one to know of it, yet he could not escape notice. put us in that world for a minute. Like, what do you think was going on with Jesus's life in that? Like, he was just so busy.
Yeah.
That even,
Yeah, I think what's happening. So a couple of things are happening in this like transition time of Jesus's public ministry. His public ministry was 3 years. The first half, at least, of his 3-year public ministry was in northern Israel, in the Galilee, Tiberias, Sea of Galilee area. I mean, that's where you saw him walk on water, feed the 5,000. I mean, he's not done. He's going to feed the 4,000. So much. In that first section of his ministry, the first half-ish of his ministry, not only do you see him teaching, but mostly the teaching is revolving around some kind of miracle. So you see him walking on water, healing, raising from the dead, casting out demons. I mean, this is happening in almost every passage for the first half of Mark.
And every miracle, he said, see to it that no one knows.
Yeah.
Or don't tell anybody.
Yeah, there's one or two where he's like,
out,
it's
right?
fine. But yeah, I mean, the guy that had the demoniac in the when he crossed over to the Sea of Galilee, yeah, I mean, now it never worked. I mean, they all did not obey him. You know, the man that was blind from birth. I mean, word gets out immediately. But what we're going to see, the second half of Mark, is less miracles, more teaching. So for me, as the one explaining the text, when I've got something like you raised someone from the dead, healed a disease or cast out a demon, well, that's sort of what the passage gets revolved around. Going forward, the second half of the passage of the book of Mark, the second half of his ministry, two things are happening. Less miracles. So here's what happens. When you start removing the miracles from Jesus, the crowds get smaller. When he's not feeding the thousands, the crowds get smaller. When he stops giving everything that they're at, the crowds get smaller. Now, things still happen, but not to the same degree in the first half.
You don't see 5,000 men plus their wives and kids following him around.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because he's just not, he's not doing the song and dance. It's less of the entertainment. Yeah. And so, to the point, the best example is by the time you get to the cross, there's less than a handful there, right? And one's his mom. Yeah. So when he stops
his own disciples
doing miracles, right? Yeah. When he stops doing miracles, it narrows dramatically from the thousands and thousands of feeding the 5,000 was the largest example to the cross. So a bunch of things are happening. Less miracles, less healing, less casting out demons, more teaching.
Sure.
That's teaching based on, and here's what happens. As he's teaching in the second half of his ministry, you also begin to see he's confronting the ones who want him dead, Pharisees and scribes. Yeah. And it's not an accident. Remember, all of this was strategically orchestrated, prophesied in the Old Testament. So Jesus knows that he's kind of poking the bear.
Sure.
So he's marching towards Jerusalem. Well, remember, the scribes and Pharisees who want him dead are coming from Jerusalem. So he's going into the belly of the beast, right? And he's talking in ways that they are going to more so want him dead because the cross is his destination.
Yeah.
So he's orchestrating everything. So you're seeing more teaching, more confrontation, more anger and hostility from the religious leaders, all going to the cross because that's ultimately the reason that he came. So this is definitely a transitional component in the whole gospel message, whether you're in Mark, Matthew, Luke, John, whichever.
I've often thought, because like you said, you can kind of divide Jesus' ministry into two sections: the miracle, the stuff he did for people, and then the latter half, which was predominantly filled with teaching and kind of giving the way to live once he's gone. But looking at the rabbinical system, they followed a rabbi around, and then would eventually teach or go off and live. So Jesus really fitting into that. But I've often thought, I wonder. And maybe a question I ask when I get to heaven one day. Did he do that to build trust with people? The miracles.
The miracles?
Did he do the miracles to build trust knowing, take the Sermon on the Mount, for instance. The Beatitudes, prime example. Just countercultural to what that system, had designed it to be. And so I don't know. I don't know if there's an answer to that, but I just wonder.
I think the best answer I've ever heard is he performed the miracles to provide validity of who he is and what he's done.
Yeah, sure.
They knew that he was, plus it shows his authority, right? So he can cast out demons because he's God. He has authority over the demons. He can walk on water. He's God. He created it. He can calm the storm. He's God. Even the storm and sea obeys. So it'd be one thing to just do the teaching. And you remember at one point, when he's teaching, they're like, who is this that speaks with authority, not like the scribes? The other thing is, sometimes you read a book and it's more scholarly, right? And at the bottom are footnotes, or at the back is a bibliography because of where they're getting their data from, and they're stating their source, quoting their source. That's a well researched book. Sometimes you read a book and you only are seeing and hearing the thoughts and opinion and belief of the author, and the author may never quote another book. Well, Jesus was doing that. I mean, when they said, why is he teaching with such authority, not like the scribes and Pharisees? It's because in those days, the scribes and Pharisees were constantly quoting a previous teacher.
Sure.
There was some rabbi from 200 years prior, and he said such and such. Well, Jesus didn't do that because he's the authority. Why would he quote someone else? So already he's claiming authority. He's claiming authority over theology, authority over the elements, the water to walk on it, the storm to calm it. He's claiming authority and showing authority over demons, over our body. I mean, he's taken blind people, giving them sight, shriveled up hand, giving them a new hand, even authority over creating ex nihilo, out of nothing. So there's nothing, essentially, and he takes and feeds thousands and thousands and thousands with baskets left over. So the miracles were showing his authority, which later kind of provided or lended credibility. Like, let's listen to the guy. He can do all these things. Yeah. So he's establishing, they can touch and see that he's human, but he's also showing with his miracles and his ability that he's God.
Yeah, and the folks who were direct beneficiaries of those miracles, take the blind man at the pool of Bethesda, when he interacted with the Pharisees immediately afterwards, it was like, I don't know what happened, but he healed me. Mm-hmm. And then they say, where is he? I don't know. It's this ultimate,
this guy
in your face, to the Pharisees to say, this just happened. Yeah. You can see that it just happened.
It's such a great passage. And they get mad at him. They're like, you can't come to the synagogue.
Yeah.
Because this happened on a Sabbath. You worked on the Sabbath. You're kicked out of the synagogue now.
Not the blind man, the lame man. I'm sorry.
Oh, the lame man, yeah. Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. The same thing happened.
Different story, different passage.
Yeah.
Different miracle, same God. Amen.
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 It's only one God. Yeah.
You spent a good chunk of time today on this analogy that was given, and we referenced it a little bit earlier, verse 27, where Jesus says, let the children be satisfied first. So for those who couldn't join us in service today, I'd love for you to talk about that again. Just to hit on why that phrase was so important and the posture of the woman, the Syrophoenician woman.
Incredible.
In her response.
So for all of it to matter, you have to have two pieces of context. One is where it happened. Mm-hmm. So they're in Tyre. If you look up Tyre on a map, it's not there. Tyre is modern-day Lebanon. So it's north of Israel, which is different than northern Israel. Galilee
I love
is
Lebanese
northern
food.
Man, yeah. I love the Lebanese people. We got a bunch of them here. Yeah. I was talking to one in the pastor guest reception thing a minute ago. Mm-hmm. So the country north of Israel today is Lebanon. Then it was the region of Tyre. The reason that matters and that Jesus went there is because there was so much mutual aggression and hostility between today Lebanon, but modern day Tyre and Israel, and it dates back 3,000 years. Mm-hmm. So I explained in the message today, you got Jezebel, all of the anti-God movement of Jezebel and her horrible leader of a husband, King Ahab. Well, that was Tyre, the region of Tyre. 2, you've got prophets that spoke against Tyre, Ezekiel, Zechariah. Mm-hmm. 3, you've got even contemporary authors that were writing about the need to, and I say contemporary to 2,000 years ago, to 2,200 years ago. There are writings we still have where they were just slandering, the Jewish writers are slandering the people of Tyre and vice versa. The Maccabean revolt in the pseudepigrapha, the Maccabean revolt, they were trying to get Israel back to have control over Jerusalem and cleanse the temple that had been desecrated when they sacrificed a pig in the temple of Jerusalem. Well, the people of Tyre fought against Israel so that they would stay under the influence of the enemy.
It's 2023 and nothing has changed.
Exactly my point. Yeah. And so when I said today in the message that, we look on the news and we see Hezbollah is attacking from the north.
Ding, ding, ding.
Right? See, these things, they root back 3,000 years.
Sure.
So and it's hard for an American to understand that because our history is like 200 years. So when we see something ancient, it's 100 years old.
Yeah,
and
we think the Washington Monument is ancient.
Oh, exactly. And the people out, in the Middle East think that it's just adorable, like 100 years, like the house they live
cute.
in.
That's cute, guys.
Whereas they're looking at things and they've got cultural things that date back thousands of years, truly. And so a modern day peace treaty is not going to resolve this.
Sure.
And even when people say, oh, if Israel would give land back, that won't solve it because this isn't ultimately about land. Now, people would say it is, but whether one is taking land or the other is taking land, the animosity dates back way before.
This is a generational problem.
Yeah, it's a millennial. I mean, millennia have gone by. So, all right, so that's one part of the context. He goes into that region to make this point. Jesus did nothing by chance. This was strategic on his part. Second part of the context. She's asking him, she's a Gentile, she's not a Jew. She's asking Jesus to heal her daughter that has a demon. And he says right there, let the children be satisfied first, for it's not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs. Essentially,
you brought up Romans chapter 1.
That's right. Paul says basically the gospel is here for the Jew first and then the Greek. So Paul talks about it with Rome. The apostles preach it in Acts 3:26. Goes to the Jews first, then to the Gentile. Even Isaiah, all the way back, I think it was Isaiah 49:6. Isaiah prophesies about it, that God would send his servant, Jesus, that would do two things: restore the tribes back to Israel. So restore the tribes back to God, ultimately is what he's saying. And then the second thing he would do is take that same message, which we know now is the gospel, to the other nations. So in the Old Testament, the Jews were only focused on their own nation, the nation of Israel. When he says,
I just fact-checked you, by the way.
Was I right?
No.
No, what was it? Isaiah?
You said 46.
49:6?
Oh, no, it wasn't 49:6. I think it was 43:6.
You think so? I had to pull up my notes and bring them in here. Fact check, because let's see if I'm right, because now I'm super curious. So, Isaiah 49:6. So I'll keep going.
He says, is it too small a thing that you should be my servant to raise up tribes of Jacob, to restore the preserved ones of Israel? I will also make you light to my nations, so that my salvation may reach to the ends of the earth.
I was right.
You were right.
Psalm 49:6. So all that...
We live fact check here on Sermon.
Yeah, and thankfully it went in my favor this time. So Jesus is stating something that's consistent with what Paul writes about later in Romans 1, what the apostles preach about later in Acts 3, what Isaiah had prophesied in Isaiah 49. And it's consistent with Jesus' own ministry. When he would go to a certain city or town, village, he would go straight to the synagogue and teach the Jews first. Sure. So consistently, the message of salvation through Christ, the Messiah, goes to the Jew first. So people often read this and naturally presume, but I've made the case today inaccurately, that Jesus was also slanderously referring to the woman as a dog. And so, okay, she's a Gentile, she's not Jew, she's in the area of modern-day Lebanon. 2, it is the case that he's showing the priority of the children of Israel first. But the word used for dog is not the same word in the Greek that we just use dog and then we have to create a context. And so for the word dog that would be, an animal scavenging out in the streets in trash, that would be the
we call them mutts.
Yeah, that would be the slanderous example. But that's not the word that Jesus used. He used the word here that's more like a puppy, more like a pet. So what he's saying is, when a family sits down to have the meal and the children are sitting around the table, the children eat first. Whatever the children don't eat, the crumbs, the scraps, well, that can go to the dogs. That can go to the puppies.
My kids feed our dog.
From the table?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a whole different, that's a different parable, I guess.
I'm looking for that one.
We'll find it. Yeah. My parable is stop feeding the dog.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah, because you don't have to clean up the mess that's made.
Yeah, it doesn't go well. Ugh. So anyway, that was the situation there. And plus, as I pointed out, it would be just simply out of character of Jesus to refer to them.
That was the big one that I took home with. I mean, knowing that the generational animosity between, these two groups of people, it was completely out of character for Jesus to have said that about her.
Completely out of character.
And that's, like when you said something today, when you're reading scripture, slow down.
That's right. Stare at it for a minute.
Yeah, and I've said this on the podcast before. When I started reading scripture in the context of first century Christianity, instead of through 21st century Americanism, it made a whole lot more sense.
Okay, so let me just make a plug for what we do here then. because this is why it matters that we do
exegetical
the
preaching.
yes. This is why it matters because so many people. Number one, preachers. I don't know who's started it, and I don't know whose fault it was, but so many people think expository teaching is boring. I teach expositionally. It's not boring.
Definitely not
It
boring.
is deep, and it makes people say, "I never knew this. I never saw that. I never heard it that way." This isn't unique to me, right? So it's not like I did my own research over in the country of Lebanon and came back and said, "Eureka, this is Tyre." I mean, that information's out there, right?
It's worth the Google.
It's a simple, but what happens is so many teachers of the Bible, they just don't teach the Bible. They teach something different. They throw a Bible verse in. My daughter, this is a good example. My daughter's a freshman in college, and she's, an hour and a half away from us, almost 2 hours away. So we've been helping her find a church where she is on the days that she's not here. Today she was here. Most Sundays she drives here. But on times she doesn't want to. She wants to stay up there, and this makes sense for her to find a local community up there. There was a church I wasn't familiar with, but a lot of her friends said, "Oh, this is a big church. A lot of people your age. You should go check it out." She went. My wife and I were curious. The Sunday that she went a month ago, as my wife and I were pulling out of the parking lot here to go to lunch, our daughter called, said, "Dad, I just left church. I'm not going back to that church." And we were like, "Oh, okay, well, why?"
That escalated quickly.
It was immediate. She didn't even beat around the bush. I mean, she said, "Well, first of all, the sermon was 12 minutes long." She said, "I kind of felt like it was an introduction." She was like, "I'm not asking for something to go."
That is your introduction.
That'd be like my welcome. I hadn't even got to the introduction yet. That's me saying hello.
I hadn't even read scripture yet.
I haven't even got to the prayer yet. She said the sermon was 12 minutes long. She said then he talked about serving. She said he read one Bible verse and never even explained it. She said it was like he was talking about just you need to get involved serving here at the church. And then she said like, "Oh, and here's a Bible verse. Let's close in prayer." She said it was weird. And she said not only did she say, "I didn't like it," all of my friends I went with, which are all freshmen and sophomore college girls or guys, whichever was in her group, she said all of us said that was awful. We don't even go back. She said the music was good. She said that. She said the music was good. We liked it. But we felt like it wasn't really church.
She said that today, too. I saw her after service.
Did she?
She said the music was great. I said, "You're right, Elizabeth. It was."
Well, you
It was.
brought a ringer, too, incidentally.
Fair. That's fair. Yeah, we had Jody McBrayer with us today. Shout out to Jody. Thank
his
you.
voice was amazing.
He's a monster, man.
I couldn't believe it.
Okay, so I've had him at churches I've served before. I've known him for a long time.
Yeah.
He has more clarity to his voice than he did 10 years ago. And
That's
to hear
amazing.
his story of what God has brought him through, and that, I mean, of course, that makes all the difference too. But I mean, if you just stand him up flat-footed and let him sing, like the stuff that comes out of his mouth is
incredible.
heavenly.
I mean, you just find yourself staring. That's what I did. I kept finding myself just staring. There's one time.
Speaking of singing,
what?
why don't you tell the nice folks out in podcast land the motion I made to you today?
You did. You did the little clicky with your thumb.
Yeah,
because you had another blessing today.
Oh my God!
It was a blessing to you, and apparently, my singing voice was in your ear again.
Again.
This is a blessing from the Lord.
Again. So I look over at him. He doesn't look back at me.
I mean,
I look over again, and I just stare, and then I motion down to my belt.
You did your little thumb
and did the
clicky.
click.
Yeah.
And your face just went. You ever seen How the Grinch Stole Christmas? That was your face when he smiles. That was your face in that moment.
I knew immediately you're hearing me. Part of me was like, I should leave it on. Yeah. Or I was thinking I could start saying things to you. Just start trash talking you up there. You're an idiot.
You sound terrible.
But then I was like, then I'll be the reason worship was interrupted, and I can't do that. Not on a Sunday morning. So I played nice, and I muted. I thought it was funny, though. You did. You were staring hardcore.
Oh, hardcore.
Yeah. I was like, oh, he's looking at me. Yeah, it was awesome. It was great.
Wrapping this up,
Yep.
and then we'll finish up. I love her response where she says, "Yes, Lord," after Jesus, gives her this phrase about the children of earth. "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs under the table feed of the children's crumbs."
Incredible.
Like what an attitude and a posture of humility.
Humble,
to say,
humble.
Even if it's the crumbs. I mean, man, I get cold chills talking about it now.
Incredible.
Even if it's the crumbs, and I say this in my prayers often. I heard a saint of a woman say this: if God never did anything else for you, he's already done too much.
Mm.
And I found myself saying something similar to that in my prayers, like, God, if you don't answer another prayer for me, thank you for what you've already done, because I don't deserve it.
Yeah.
but in your kindness, you do this for me. You allow us to have the crumbs from the children. Mm-hmm. And it's enough.
I mean, and he even said it, because of this answer, Jesus said, go, the demon has gone out of your daughter. So because of how you've responded, I've basically granted your prayer request, right? I mean,
it's interesting too. That's a separate, probably a separate question, or probably a separate topic of conversation. But Scripture teaches us, do not put the Lord your God at the test. But there are times when the Lord tests us to see what our response is going to be in order. And so I think it's very, very important as a big take home for us from this, our posture of humility and our desire to be in the presence of God. Like going back to verse 1, he tried to get away to not be noticed and couldn't do it because people wanted to be in his presence. People wanted to be around Jesus. Yeah, he was tired for sure. Yeah. But the desire for people to be near him as a teacher outweighed.
I mean, it just proves it's the same way now. I mean, folks that come into the visitor reception after every service, or when they contact us on email or anything like that. I mean, you hear people becoming, or they're expressing such gratitude for truth, gratitude for, the reality or the realization. Now, what I also appreciate about her answer, I mean, I was going to say she asked nothing for herself. I mean, she would benefit from her daughter not having the demon for sure.
I mean, I would benefit from that.
I mean, sometimes I've wondered if my kids have had a demon when they were younger, especially. That's a fact. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're acting like a demon.
We had one of those days yesterday.
Oh, yeah? Well, your kids are still little. Mine are not so little anymore.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your demons are worse than mine.
My demons are bigger.
They got more problems.
Taller demons. They cost a lot more money. Yeah.
Bigger kids, bigger problems.
Yeah. But it was, her response was humble, and a great takeaway from us is she answered from within the parable. So he's telling this parable sitting around the table, and, there's puppies, basically, there's dogs. And she's like, well, I'll be a puppy. Can I have a scrap? And I mean, she didn't get offended at what he, how he was referring to her as a puppy, as a pet. Go hear the sermon. It'll make more sense when you hear all that. But, I mean, there's so much to learn from that, because so many of the ways that we respond, our flesh gets in there, our pride, our ego. There's a lot to learn from that. Clearly, Mark was highlighting her humility. He was highlighting her faith, especially in a time when the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the religious leaders of Israel, already the children of Israel, so to speak, were already rejecting, what he's been giving them. And then his own apostles were too confused. They weren't embracing what Jesus had been saying. I mean, they're constantly surprised. He walks on water and they're surprised. He feeds thousands and they're surprised. I mean, they're still not getting it. So that's another reason he took them aside to tire.
It's just like us, man. It should not surprise us when God answers our prayers. And yet we find ourselves saying, whoa.
You know what I find myself doing? I don't find myself surprised when he answers the prayer. I find myself justifying it in another way. Like,
reasoning it out.
Yeah. Well, this makes sense. This thing happened. And I'm like, wait a minute. No, I prayed, God gave. That's one of my
Brian.
problems.
Here I am.
I prayed and
God gave.
Here's Kellan.
Here I am.
I should help you more with unmuted mics on Sundays. Yeah. You're doing great.
I can't. Yeah. You're getting a new microphone this week.
That doesn't end up in your ear?
Yeah.
Yeah. You just got me a new mic.
You're about to get another one.
You want me to get a third mic?
Well, the actual pack.
What's wrong with the one I got?
This thing will stay the same.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't have to tell me anymore.
Yeah.
That's a conversation I don't care to be in.
Clip it on your belt and just go.
Yeah. Don't take away the mutability, though.
It will not be taken away.
Okay, good.
But it will. Well,
remove it from your ear?
I may duct tape it or something until your sermon and then go rip it off. Great passage. I'm loving Mark. You think we'll finish Mark by the year end?
No way. Not a chance.
What about next year?
Probably.
What are you going to do at Christmas time?
We are going to go into a, what's it called? Advent series. In fact, we're going to be in Isaiah.
Here's a little fun fact this year. Christmas Eve is on a Sunday. So we will be lighting the fourth Advent candle
the Christ
candle.
Oh, that's true. You're right. Yeah, that'll be really cool. I haven't thought about that.
So 10 o'clock, you want to mark your calendars now for Christmas Eve, 10 o'clock and 5 o'clock.
It is a phenomenal, those Christmas Eve services are amazing.
Our 10 o'clock, they'll be identical, but our 10 o'clock will be a little more informal, meaning,
kids in pajamas, probably.
Yeah, I mean, just... It's
Christmassy.
It's okay if your kids, can't sit still and all that kind of stuff.
Now, there have been times where we had Christmas on Sunday and we still have church.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it's a Christmas
Wouldn't it be terrible
pajama.
to not have church on Christmas Day?
Plenty of churches I know have done it. I think it's a credibility issue at that point. That's a whole other podcast we'll have.
Let's get into that.
Yeah, I know.
That'll be a fun one to discuss.
But I've had to say before, the kids up to age, say 12, can wear pajamas.
Do y'all do the family pajamas?
I'm like, I don't want to, if you're a grown man, you do not have permission to wear pajamas on a Sunday morning. No, golly.
I'm wearing my
Security will be like, you're not going in.
With the footies.
Brian's just going to get annoyed seeing you. It'll distract my sermon. Somebody get him out of here. He's wearing a
That's going to be
Snuggie.
my payback for you singing in my ear.
Wearing a onesie?
Wearing a onesie.
Remember the Snuggie?
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I had a Snuggie.
I'm not a fan of guys dressing that way.
I mean, I wore stuff under it.
I don't even like Crocs.
You're wrong. Let me tell you why. Crocs are the most comfortable shoe, and that little strap, you can flip those suckers in four-wheel drive.
Yeah?
When you put the strap on the back.
Is that right?
That's what I call it. You put them in four-wheel drive. They're alternative vehicles at that point. You can take off and running if you need to. And I've done it.
If you can buy shoes at like Kroger that don't wear them to church on Sunday.
I think that's marketability. And
Now listen, if I was the inventor creator of Crocs. Oh yeah.
They almost went bankrupt a few years ago.
Are you serious?
Listen to this
How is that
story.
possible?
Okay, we got to wrap this up. They almost went bankrupt a few years ago. Word got out that they were going bankrupt, and I secretly think it was a marketing ploy. I don't think they were going bankrupt, but all of a sudden, people started buying Crocs. Like they reported record
supporting them?
sales. Yeah, because people were freaking out. Like nurses are wearing them. You know, dads, me,
Everywhere I go.
them.
I see them. They're like
love 'em.
Camouflage.
They're great.
I see guys that go hunting, take off
In
their hunting
Crocs.
boots later, and they put on their Crocs, and I'm like, you just lost? Okay, fine, whatever.
What if they make like blaze orange Crocs, which I think would be sweet.
No, there's got to be something out there.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Anyway, last thing I have, somebody walked up to you today and handed you a gift bag.
They did.
What was in that gift bag?
It was like a candle.
What flavor?
The scent was pumpkin spice.
Why? Because we talked about it on the podcast.
Because of this podcast.
So here's what I'm telling you. We have influence.
Oh, wow.
So friends, if you would like to bring us gifts of
Other than pumpkin spice. That's you. That's a Kellan thing, isn't it?
I don't like pumpkin spice. I don't either. It's not.
They gave us that as a gift, incidentally. I mean, as a joke, I should say.
Yeah,
They
it
gave
was a
as
joke. They referenced the podcast.
Yeah, it was a spoof.
So if you're listening to this, we'll gladly take, free meals, tickets to
NASCAR tickets.
He wants NASCAR.
Yeah.
I'll take sporting events.
Racing
I've never been to a
tickets.
Falcons game. But they
That
always
will
play on
change.
Sunday.
Do they play? Oh, that's the point.
So
that's
that's
the
the
problem.
problem.
Yeah. See, when you grow up in North Carolina, you don't even know what football is.
Yeah, well, you had the Panthers.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I tell people that if you're from North Carolina, football is like Bigfoot. Like, we've heard of it. We've just never seen it,
Facts.
Yeah.
Facts. All right. Well,
All right, man.
Enjoy your time away. Do you want me to run the church while you're gone?
Did you just handle it? Yeah.
Yeah. Can I park in your office?
You know what? There was a conversation years ago
Mm-hmm.
when I was here. Like, Brian, who's in charge when you're out of town? I said, me.
So true.
This isn't like 1940. You can still call me, you know.
I don't know. I'm going to go sit in your chair.
Yeah.
You have a
You
nice
can have
chair.
it. It's okay.
Joyce, will you get me a sandwich?
Be careful.
She will.
Listen,
she will poison that sandwich.
she's pretty incredible. I mean,
Anyway. All right. Thank you
All
guys for tuning in. We love you. Join us next Sunday. We'll wrap up Mark 7. We're almost done.
yeah, correct.
We're almost done.
Lord willing.
So I'm excited about that. We'll wrap up Mark 7. Fingers crossed. And we will see y'all next Sunday, 9 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Thanks for tuning in. See ya.